Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Another Tottenham Hotspur signing. The third Tottenham Hotspur signing of this transfer window, and there's still 2 weeks left of pre-season. What is that all about? It's pretty much unheard of for a long time. I honestly can't think of this much kind of business being. Trying to think, maybe the first Pochettino pre-season, perhaps. But even that I don't know. So Matt Doherty is a Tottenham Hotspur player, obviously been confirmed today. It's been a bit of a kind of a whirlwind week. It's a funny one. I mentioned him kind of in passing last week in the last video I did, but kind of said I think the difficulty with him was always going to be the price. Boy, did Spurs fix that price. I got kind of told on, when was it, Monday? It was either Monday or Tuesday. I'm trying to remember now. I found out that suddenly something had happened in terms of the price, and Spurs had been made aware that he was available for an incredible bargain price. And then things escalated really quickly from there. And that's where we arrived today with the former, I can get used to saying that, the former Wolverhampton Wanderers right back, Matt Doherty, is now a Tottenham Hotspur player. 28 years old. He had 3 years left on his deal. In terms of creative stats, goals, I think it's goals directly affected, I think is the term. Second only to Trent Alexander-Arnold in the Premier League. Missed about, I think it's 7 games in the past 4 seasons. Pretty much an ever-present. Played 50 games last year for Wolves as they reached, they were excellent in the Premier League. Ran out of steam very slightly, maybe towards the end, but still a fantastic 7th place finish. Quarterfinals Europa League, and he was superb for him. I came out with the news that Spurs were looking to sign him, and Wolves fans were genuinely quite angry and upset at even the thought that might happen, let alone the kind of figures that I was talking about. And I think that speaks volumes about how highly he was rated as well. He'd been there for 10 years, very much a kind of a club loyal man. He'd signed at 18 from Bohemians over in Ireland, and they very much made it clear he won't be going anywhere. He's now a Tottenham Hotspur player, and I've been kind of putting off saying the fee. If you haven't read it in my stuff already, it's just, I think you need to get your head around it. £13.4 million with no add-ons whatsoever. That was the final figure that Spurs, or I suppose Daniel Levy, negotiated for Matt Dougherty, who's been one of the standout right-backs in the Premier League in the last 2 years. Phenomenal piece of transfer dealing. Love him or hate him, Daniel Levy, he gets a lot of flack for certain things, and by all means, sometimes maybe the attention to detail and saving money here and there, of course, must have cost Spurs in transfer deals over the years. But there is no denying that they've absolutely got themselves a bargain here. Watching all the interviews today as well, he sounds incredibly excited about getting started. He wanted to play in the friendly, I think it was against Birmingham on Saturday. The day he was doing his medical, he was that excited, he just wanted to be involved, but it was very much, well, no, let's get this all finalised and done first. The Wolves fans have been quite angry. Wolves have come out and kind of explained it as exactly what I was saying. Look, this guy's been here for 10 years, wanted to move on, and we kind of almost pretty much couldn't stand in his way. And there's been funny stuff as well. If you weren't aware, Matt Doherty grew up as an Arsenal fan. He tweeted in the past saying, certain things, I can't remember exactly what they were, but that he was a big Arsenal fan, he loves them, all this sort of stuff. So that's been around for the last few days, and Arsenal fans have been enjoying that, as they always do. But Spurs, I felt today, absolute one of their social media triumphs. I know the chap who came up with this idea, and I've already told him he's an absolute genius, because what they did, if you haven't seen it yet, Matt Dougherty sits at a table, sits at a laptop, starts going through his tweets and hitting delete, and he kind of looks at the camera like, ooh. And then at the end, he kind of goes, well, as if to say, what are you going to do? And then he kind of hits the Spurs badge, taps it. And it was lovely. It's essentially just owning it. Not, people now can't really take the mickey out of it, because he's come out and he's owned it, and he's just like, that's football, isn't it? And I think it's one of these things I always hear before, this player supports them, he used to play for Arsenal youth, whatever. Does it matter? I think we see, fans see football as it's, of course, that our club support is everything. Of course it is. But ultimately, to a professional playing in a football game, it's just kind of something you used to, I suppose, like a hobby, whereas your job is your job. And I don't think you can say that anyone that supports I think it's so rare to actually have anyone in a club that actually supports that club unless they've come through the academy, or you get the odd one, who maybe does get their dream move, as it's called. Robbie Keane certainly had a lot of those. But yeah, and I just thought that was brilliant, the way they owned it and just said, look, I'm sure Arsenal have had players that supported Spurs. There was always talk about Bergkamp supporting Spurs, although I think he kind of once claimed no, it was more Hoddle than Spurs, and Spurs have had Arsenal fans over the year. It doesn't really matter as long as they go out on the pitch and they do what they got to do. And everything about Dougherty suggests that's what he's going to do. Terrific signing, honestly. I think Spurs have had such a clear transfer kind of policy. They've got flack because people are looking at what's happening at Chelsea and they see the ridiculous money that there's so. I mean, don't get me wrong, fantastic signings at Chelsea. Brilliant young players and some older ones as well, Thiago Silva. But Frank Lampard is so much pressure. There's talk about, I saw someone saying on the radio, they've got to make top four. I think they've got a challenge. If you're spending that much money, it's incredible. I think Spurs have just gone about it in their Spurs way. It's not going to be the most popular way, but I think they're very much Mourinho, as he clearly told us towards the end of the season, I have certain targets that I want, they're achievable, and the club are going to do everything they can to get them. I believe that they can be got. And so far, that's happening. Pierre-Emile Højbjerg coming in, absolutely perfect for what Tottenham want. I've seen him now play 3 times and totally still maintain that belief. Joe Hart come in with the experience. Again, I've watched him now 3 times doing exactly pretty much what he's been called upon to do. Haven't really seen him tested yet as a goalkeeper, but in terms of that vocal leader, and I'll come to that in a little bit, I thought he's been really good. And now Dougherty is, if you notice, I'm pronouncing it slightly different to how it's said, because I've been told by various Irish people that technically it's Doherty is how it's kind of pronounced in Ireland, Doherty, but obviously I don't have an Irish accent, so that sounds horrific. But they said essentially, apparently the anglicised way of saying it is Dougherty. So if I've got that wrong, I apologise, but that's kind of how I'm pronouncing it for now. Anyone that knows that watches these are absolutely murder pronunciations anyway, and there's more to come of those later. But yeah, I think it's a terrific signing. Some of the people that support Wolves have kind of been talking to me about him and saying if there's one weakness, perhaps he can get caught out in his defending sometimes. That's probably he's more of an attacking fullback than a defensive fullback. But what I've kind of said to them is that's exactly what Mourinho wants. We know it with the Sergio Reguilon role as the advanced right back. He's pretty much, Dougherty plays at Wolves as a wing back because they play a back 3. Kind of is going to do that at Spurs, because what happens at Spurs, if you're not aware, I'm sure you are, when Spurs are in position, the right back, Aurier for now, is right up the pitch, and Ben Davies as left back tucks in and it becomes a back 3. So essentially, the right back is kind of a wing back in this weird kind of Mourinho system. So Dougherty, and another thing he does, which I've watched loads of stuff of him in recent days just to kind of educate myself, as it were, because obviously covering Spurs constantly, you mainly watch what Spurs do, and you don't always get to see the other games unless they're at different times. He's a kind of a bit of a poacher. There's an excellent article on Sky Sports, I think it was Adam Bate wrote it, really good piece analysing exactly what he does and how he's almost like a support striker, because whenever the ball's on the left, he always gets into the box. And he's always, I think he even said that in his interview today, he's a player that, he's kind of like an attacker who happens to also be a right back. He's got to be tested defensively. It'll be interesting to see how he deals with that. But I would say, you've got Mourinho and you've got Ledley King, Mourinho, one of the top defensive coaches, or certainly has had the meanest defences out there in football. And Ledley King, I've been watching him during warm-ups working with the back 4, and I don't think it's any coincidence that in these 3 friendlies, albeit against lesser opposition, I think they've had about 1 shot on target, and that was probably the penalty. Maybe 1-1, probably exaggerating slightly, but the defence has looked really, really solid, whoever they've been playing. And I do think Ledley's playing his part in that, which I absolutely love. So Dougherty done, brilliant. Let's move on to the next one. I'm going to talk about those friendlies first, though. We've got some other transfer talk coming up towards the end. It's been a really busy week this week. I feel like I've almost lived at the stadium because I was there for the Ipswich game. 2 days later, I went and did the Skywalk, which is very cool. I wrote about an article about it. If you're kind of having doubts over heights and things like that, it's superb. I think all the players then went and did it the day after. It's really cool. It is. I really do recommend it. It's, when I've read my piece, people getting all funny about, they're glorifying a stadium attraction over signing players, and they signed the player a couple of days later. I think we get overexcited on social media, don't we? Me also, myself also. But yeah, no, Skywalk is very cool. It is very cool. It's not an advert. I'm not getting paid to say that. It was pretty cool, especially when you're up right at the top and looking down over the pitch, standing next to the big old golden cockerel. It's not that old, I guess, but it technically is a 3D version of the original one, but that's getting all nerdy and I won't go into that. So let's talk about the matches because, so Saturday, Ipswich, Monday, Skywalk, back on Friday for the Reading match, and yesterday we had Birmingham game. So we've been getting to see a lot of football, which is lovely after the month of not having it. I'm kind of whiz through roughly what happened in the friendlies. If you're not aware, but if you did and saw it, then you'll know most of this. But if you kind of only watch bits and pieces, hopefully this will fill in a few of the gaps. So Reading was 4-1. Own goal to start things off. Dele Alli, lovely lob for the second goal. Son curling finish for the third. Eric Lamela came off the bench at half-time and early in the second half. Scored a peach of a free kick. Absolutely delightful curling free kick, which was, lovely. So Reading match I thought was really good. I think the biggest thing for me was the moment when João Sacramento came screaming out of the dugout, started shouting at all the Spurs strikers and the attackers up there, like, to press. And Mourinho started, Ledley King even jumped up, and all three of them were shouting at them to do it. And they put Reading under so much pressure. And actually, Dele Alli's goal kind of came this was after Dele's goal, and his had come through pressing. He'd intercepted a header. And they just constantly wanted it. And I love that. Anyone that's watched these again will know I love that version of Tottenham. The snarling, aggressive, harassing, pressing Tottenham that win the ball back high up the pitch. And it kind of feels like Mourinho is going to have that as one of his weapons in his armoury. We know what Mourinho's like. He kind of plays different tactics for each game, whereas Pochettino maybe had the one philosophy, as he called it, that he almost like let the opposition worry about us, whereas Mourinho's more setting up per game. But I thought that's really cool that Spurs will have that in their armoury again, because I think they've missed it. And then yesterday, obviously, we had a very different friendly, Birmingham. Lots of players missing, lots of younger players playing, and Spurs struggled. Birmingham just sat back, and Spurs had to kind of break them down, which they struggled to do. They really did lack a creative force out there until pretty much almost the last kick of the game. Steven Bergwijn cut inside and curled a beautiful low shot into the goal. Really lovely goal. If you haven't seen it, do watch it because it's superb. But yeah, I think that was the biggest thing about yesterday is what you saw with the Reading match. Again, we've always got to counter this with the fact that obviously these are teams, championship teams that are still doing their pre-seasons. They're still fragmented. They're still changing people, fitness, all of that. But what I would say is, if you don't have that playmaker, and Tottenham haven't got Lo Celso at the moment, then they play the two kind of the one way to get around that is to have fast counter-attacking, almost like a front three. Just get the ball, work in transitions, and catch them on the break. That was fine against Reading. Worked brilliantly. Dele Alli was superb. One of the best, I'd say one of the best. It's a friendly, but I thought Dele really. I mean, we'll talk about him in a little minute, but I thought he was superb. And in the Birmingham game, it kind of went the other way. Birmingham sat back and they didn't really know what to do. And that's really when the absence of a playmaker was glaring. Because not only was Lo Celso not fit, but also Lamela was just becoming a father for the second time. So he wasn't there yesterday. He was at the birth taking photos of his, I don't know if it's girlfriend or partner, who probably didn't appreciate it afterwards because she was kind of almost like the early stages of going into labour, and also took a photo of himself with the new baby watching the Spurs match, which was quite cool, to be fair, although I don't know if she appreciated that or not. But yeah, and I do think that that's something that has to be rectified this summer. They can't rely, as they used to, just on Christian Eriksen. They can't rely now on Lo Celso. He's not exactly like Eriksen, he's not the exact kind of blueprint that Eriksen was. He's a bit different, but I just feel like they're lacking another person that can play through balls, especially Lamella's kind of a quasi-playmaker, more of a winger. Kind of all these links that you keep seeing popping up with wingers. I'd like to see more thought about an attacking midfielder. I do think they'll stiffen around for one as well. But as we'll come to later, it's all about getting the money right. So Højbjerg, as I say, played really well, especially against Birmingham. He was involved in the first goal, I think it was. Yeah, I think he won the ball quite high up the pitch. Or am I thinking of Ipswich? No, I think I'm the Ipswich fan. So many matches in such a quick time. Anyway, Højbjerg, he keeps pressing. He's the instrument that I think a lot of the pressing will go through. He really attacks high up the pitch, as in hassles up the pitch. You kind of imagine that, he's got a wife and 2 kids, that even in the morning, when they wake up, he's probably harassing and buzzing around them because he's already started his day of being a pressing nightmare. And I think that's what you'll see at Tottenham. I was quite surprised at how high up the pitch he operates. I think maybe we thought we were going to get a more defensive midfielder. I think he will play that with certain midfield partners, but I think when he's got the licence to, he is going to be up there and in their faces of the opposition. And, that's why he got the most ball recoveries in the Premier League last season. So, yeah, he impressed me. Dele Alli was superb. Not so much yesterday, but yesterday was a weird one. He kind of came on for the second half. And yeah, the kind of rhythm wasn't right. The players weren't linking very well. There's mixed performance from the younger players, which I'll talk about in a second as well. But no, after the first game against Reading, Jose Mourinho, I think it was Eric Dyer first. Eric Dyer came out and said, "I'm so excited about what we're seeing with Dele. He's kind of back to where he was," which is great to hear. And then Jose Mourinho came out and said pretty much the same thing. He said, he's a really... he's working hard. He's really exciting out there, and you can see the Dele Alli that had that meteoric rise. And if Spurs can get that Dele Alli back, he's going to be fantastic. And Son was on fire, certainly in the first 2 games. Again, a little bit quieter yesterday, but he only came on quite late. So I'm not going to hold that against him. But his finishing has been superb. So yeah, I think they're certainly positives. Young players, there was mixed bag. I thought Harvey White started both games last 2 days. Really did himself the world of good. Looked composed, really clever passing, good in tight situations. And I think you can tell the senior players respect him. You can always tell with a youngster whether he's taken by the group into the group or not, pretty much because they give him the ball or not. And Harvey White is getting given the ball because they trust him. And he finally, yesterday, he would have loved that Lamella free kick on Friday, but yesterday, finally got to take a couple of set pieces, and Dyer really... free kick and a corner, both of them. He should have put his headers on target, and perhaps White would have had 2 assists. But no, he did himself the world of good. Dennis Serkin played very well. It started yesterday, came off the bench on Friday. What I thought was quite interesting is Joe Hart, I was speaking about him earlier. He started yesterday, and he is constantly talking to every single player, instructing them, telling them what's happening behind them, what they're doing, what to do, where to play, position themselves. Where to play balls, everything. And with Serkin, he did a lot of that, talked him through it, and the bench were talking him through it as well. He's a young player, so he needs a bit of that, but I thought it really benefited him. He played really well. Birmingham barely got down his side at all. Really, really, it was impressive. And I was really pleased with Cameron Carter-Vickers as well. He had a bit unfortunate in the Reading match. Ball hit his hand, couldn't do much about it, gave them the penalty, and they scored. And which kind of was a shame because he played quite well. And I thought yesterday, he was really good, really dominating. I do fear that maybe he's not tall enough for the archetypal Mourinho centre-back. So I do wonder whether he'll go on. And, I think Spurs have got to make a decision now whether they sell him or whether they loan him again. But he's developing. He had a great loan at Luton last season. I thought he did really, really well yesterday. It'd be interesting to see if... because against Watford, unless he goes, I don't think he's been called up for any international duty with USA. So I think he'll get another chance. And, you never know. He might convince Mourinho, and that's a bit of a packed field. But as a homegrown player, would it be the worst thing in the world to keep him and give him some chances, especially with all the matches coming up as well? At least maybe delay any loan decision until October, once you've got through this little period of Carabao Cup and Europa League. But no, he did really well. On the flip side, who maybe didn't, Jack Clarke was a shame. I thought he was excellent against Ipswich, but in the last 2 games, he's had a mixed bag. Yesterday was a bit of a game of 2 halves. First half, he was pretty much non-existent. Second half, got a bit brighter, and I think we have to remember, of course, he's only 19. But I think with him, it's just about improving that end product. There was no lack of willingness to run at people, which was great, but it was just the end product. And I also think he needs to bulk up a bit like Ryan Sessegnon's been doing, because I just feel he got knocked off the ball a little bit too easily. But no, Mourinho, I think, is having a proper look at him. He's a player that Levy wanted. If you don't know the backstory, Daniel Levy really liked the deal for him. You know, he's a talented young player. But when he was in the final stages, Pochettino didn't actually really want him, or didn't feel he was ready to be part of the first team yet. So they had to kind of hastily sort out that deal back to Leeds on loan, which didn't really work. So they had too many loan players. It was all a bit of a mess. So I do feel sorry for the kid. But there's potential there. You can see talent there. He just needs to kind of, he's a young guy. It's just the next stage is about bulking himself up as well. Touched on Ryan Sessegnon. Ryan Sessegnon, it's a funny one, really. I don't really feel he did himself justice in an attacking sense. When he played at left back, he was quite solid in the second half. But again, for him, 2 big chances. First one he put wide. First one was blocked on the line. Second one he put into side netting. And you just kind of feel moments like that go for him. It'll up his confidence. I think the biggest disappointment for me is that when he was at Fulham, he would just sprint down that pitch. He would go past players. He was so good. And I just feel he's had his confidence bashed by what's kind of happened in the last season. And I think they need to really work on that side of him, because I think there's such a player there. I've always said it. And the other young player was Jedson Fernandez, who he's had a really weird pre-season. Against Ipswich, brilliant at right back. Against Reading, a bit shaky at right back, to say the least. Against Birmingham, he played as a number 10 behind Lucas Moura in the first half, and his passing was abysmal, all over the shop, going everywhere, behind players. Spurs couldn't get any rhythm because it just didn't suit him. Second half, Dele came on and he moved back into a more kind of anchorman role. And he played quite well there. Much more simple passing. And I think the key, as I've said probably a million times with Jensen, find his position. At the moment, we've still got a year left or season left of his 18-month loan deal. At the moment, you wouldn't see Spurs paying any permanent fee for him. But there's a season to go. I think his versatility will get him lots of minutes, but I also think that Mourinho needs to lock down what his position is and then develop him in that sense. Again, only 21. We're talking about really young players here. So they did, mixed bag, like I say. Also, obviously, people have noted there were players there and players not there. Harry Kane surprised everyone by being on the bench. He has been away, I think it was Bahamas, when obviously they had that change in the regulations where he suddenly had to isolate when he came back. So he's done all that. But then it was very weird. He was involved in the warm-up. He was on the bench throughout the first half. Then he didn't reappear for the second half. And we don't know why. Spurs absolutely just kept strum about it afterwards. All of us, media, were asking questions. The issue is with friendlies, we don't get to talk to Mourinho or the players. That will return when the Premier League comes back. But in friendlies, there's no access whatsoever. So essentially, you're just trying to put the questions out there to the club, and the club were just, playing dumb, essentially. Did he? Was he not there on the bench for the second half? Which is incredibly frustrating. And we don't know why. But I just want to list for you the players that weren't involved yesterday. It was a crazy amount. So, Lo Celso, Davinson Sanchez, they were both there. I saw them there, but they obviously didn't play any part in it. Lo Celso, I presume, the club again are staying so quiet on all these things because they don't have to reveal it. But Lo Celso, I presume, Mourinho said before the end of the season that groin injury that he was struggling with, they were going to let him kind of recover throughout the break and then a bulk of pre-season. So I do wonder whether that's still him waiting to come back from that and just resting it and getting the proper treatment. Sanchez, like I said, was there. Harry Winks wasn't there. Harry Winks didn't play a part. Japhet Tanganga didn't play a part. Tonga and Dembele. Obviously, we've seen the speculation from France that again hasn't been confirmed over here yet about him. Juan Foyth, Danny Rose, Toby Alderweireld, and we know Lamela was not him having his baby, but his wife was. So there's a lot of players missing, and there's obviously, anyone's seen the Daily Mail article suggesting that Spurs have got a couple of problems with COVID. There's been all kinds of, who was it, this player, is it that player? Obviously, Dembele has been reported in France to have it, but absolutely no one has confirmed that of an official nature. It's strange, just like, obviously I saw Harry Winks did the Skywalk on Tuesday, but yet hasn't been involved since that first Ipswich game. Tanganga we've seen in training photos. Foyth was involved against Ipswich and then was sitting behind the subs against Reading on Friday. It's so strange. Danny Rose, I think we know why he's not involved, because he's going to be off. But yeah, it's frustrating as journalists, because obviously we're not really getting anywhere, and we've been told lots of things, but as I've always said on here, I'm not going to report things unless I get them confirmed, because it's just speculation then, isn't it? And it's spreading stuff that could actually be wrong, and then paint someone out to be, or have an issue that they don't have. So yeah, I think Spurs, bearing in mind they've got 3 wins out of 3 with such a weird amount of players not involved, is interesting, and I think we'll learn probably a lot more from. We've got internationals coming up. Various players will or won't be able to go away, and maybe that's when we'll find out stuff. So let's go back to transfers. Now we've got that all the way. I want to start with Donny van der Beek links. Terrific player, 23-year-old Ajax midfielder who, if you remember, scored the goal, the winning goal on that leg. At the home leg, not this season, last season, but the one before the night in Amsterdam. He scored the winner at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Lots of transfer stuff around him at the moment, because he was left out of Ajax's friendly squad to play Eintracht Frankfurt, with his manager Erik Ten Hag saying that there's been developments there, which obviously means transfers. So I think there was a chap on Dutch television who started all the Spurs links by, when they asked him where he thought he would go, he suggested his opinion. I think, personally, from what I've been told, it was more his best fit would be Tottenham, and they didn't apparently kind of pursue that. But what I've heard about Van der Beek, just from my perspective, is that he's a player Spurs really like. They've followed him for a few years now, one that they kind of keep an eye on, and apparently, he's been quite interested in coming to Spurs in the past. Very close friend of Steven Bergwijn, I think technically best friend, obviously Dutch teammates, and also he's a big fan of Mourinho as well. So I think there's interest there in coming to Tottenham. However, that's kind of probably where the positive news ends, because Spurs' case, really, they're now in a position, they've done their 3 signings, obviously they haven't spent a lot. I think we're looking at, about 3 million outlay in the end on Højbjerg because of the Kyle Walker-Peters deal. As I say, 13.4 for Dougherty and a free transfer, so it's not a lot. We are looking at about 17 million. But Spurs are just financially so... People get quite annoyed when I talk about finances and Spurs, and obviously it's been such a bad year for all football clubs and businesses. A lot of Spurs' money also is tied up in property. Everyone keeps saying about it, the 8th richest club in the world, but that's in value. That's value of the squad, value of the property. And Spurs haven't got something like £1.2 billion worth of property. Obviously, we know what that stadium's like and everything. But yeah, so everything I've been led to believe, Spurs have to sell now. They've brought in 3 players, and now they need to start really working on getting players out the door. So they're not really in a position to battle for a player who's reportedly worth around £45 million. They need to get players out the door first before they can really countenance getting involved in a battle. And it sounds like, I think Man United are going to get in there anyway and bring him to Old Trafford, which maybe that's what the chap on the Dutch journalist was saying on telly, whether with United it's probably going to be quite crowded, that midfield as well. Whereas, as I said earlier, Spurs could do with another attacking kind of central midfielder. But yeah. And the other thing Spurs have got, obviously, as I've said a million times, I don't want to harp on it too much, is the foreign player issue. Right now, they've got exactly 17, the limit for their European squad when Højbjerg came in. Matt Doherty, if I hadn't said before, homegrown player. Because he came from Bohemians when he was 18, he got in the 3 seasons he needed to before the season, or I think the last season was the season he turned 21. So technically he's homegrown. Wolves certainly registered him as homegrown in UEFA and Premier League squad, so that's great. Technically that means if Spurs were to move on Sergio Reguilon with Leverkusen, Milan and Monaco sniffing around him, then technically they're opening up a foreign player spot, because obviously swapping a foreign player for a homegrown player. But yeah, at the moment they're very much now going to operate on a one-in, one-out mentality, especially with foreign players, because I had someone yesterday when I suggested this said, "Oh, but why have Spurs got to do this? Why can't Spurs just trust that they'll sell a player afterwards?" Because this is Tottenham Hotspur, and this has been one of the biggest problems Spurs have had in recent years, is they struggle to sell players. Partly that could be asking too much. Partly it could be because actually the wages and the bonus system at Spurs, people always forget about. Spurs have the best performance-related bonuses in the Premier League, or they certainly used to a couple of years ago. That players often just won't move on because they can't get what they're getting at Spurs elsewhere. And I do think Spurs struggle to sell players. So I kind of understand why at the moment you wouldn't want to kind of stuff yourselves by bringing in a player and then you have someone you cannot get rid of. We saw it with Eriksen. How long did they take to sell Eriksen? How long did it take to sell Wanyama? They essentially almost gave him away for free in the end. And countless other players that have kind of hung around and, just not been moved on. So, yeah, that's why they can't really. They have to sell first and then bring in another. And I think, sadly, with Donny van de Beek, I think that's why you're going to probably see him go elsewhere. I'd love him not to because I think he's a really talented young player. But unless Spurs were able to move really quickly in the transfer market and get someone off the books, I can't see that one happening. But fingers crossed, you never know. The other guy that I keep getting asked about is the Real Madrid left-back, also 23, Sergio Reguillion. Again, I'm so sorry about pronunciation. Reguilon, I'm going to go with that. I don't know why I sounded French there. He's been at Sevilla on loan for the last season, had a really good season. They obviously got to Europa League final and won it. So he's had a terrific season. I think they finished fourth in La Liga as well. Very talented guy. Now, the thing with him, Spurs really like him as well. He's another one that they're very much admirers of. But the thing with Spurs, they're not really looking for a left-back this summer, which might upset some people. But I think with Spurs, they feel they've got, Mourinho said we've got, or as Mourinho's feeling is that they've got Ben Davies, they've got Sessegnon, Dennis Sirkin they're so impressed with, and they've got Tanganga, can all play at left-back. So they're not really looking for one. However, I think if Reguilon, I don't know why I keep going French for that, if Reguilon is available for a bargain price, I think it might be one of those, a bit like Steven Bergwijn in January, that they just say, we like this guy. And if it's a price that is really doable, let's just do it to secure him for the future. But again, with the season he's had, is it going to be a bargain price? I can't say you're going to look anywhere like the Dougherty kind of price. But keep an eye on it. Like I say, it wasn't a priority position for them to spend in. I do wonder whether they'll use their money elsewhere. But keep an eye. If there's any sniff, like with Dougherty, that price is not going to be a big price, I wouldn't be stunned if Spurs make a move, even though he's not a priority signing. They really, really like him. I think he could be a real top left back for the future. So keep an eye on that one. Other position-wise, obviously, they still want to get a striker in. That's going to be the next one. Like I say, once they've got the money coming in. It's been going on too long, hasn't it, not having another striker? I don't need to tell you that. I'm sure you're just as frustrated. So many names are looking at, I think this is a position they'd like to get a homegrown player in, but you look at Callum Wilson, who I think would be perfect for them, and I think he'd love to come to Spurs, but the issue there is the homegrown premium. Allegedly, apparently Bournemouth are looking for 30 million or so. Spurs are never going to pay that. Absolutely not going to pay that. It's just not going to happen. So unless that becomes a more realistic figure, he won't be coming to Tottenham. Various other names that have kind of been bandied about that I keep hearing is Chris Wood's one. Had a really good season. People might laugh at Chris Wood as a potential bet. I'd heard that Spurs are just keeping a little eye on him because in his situation, 28, I think he scored 14 Premier League goals last season. He's a big, bustling Mourinho-esque striker. Again, how it works, I think he's got a few years left in his deal. I don't think he'd be cheap, and I think Burnley would probably be quite loath to lose him. But, as a backup striker or someone that Kane can feed off, I don't think that's a bad deal at all. I think he's like kind of a bit the younger version of like a Giroud type, who I felt in January would be a good deal. I'd still be interested to see what happens with Giroud, with the amount of faces and new incoming players at Chelsea, whether he still has a guaranteed kind of position in that Chelsea team. But here's another one, and one that's kind of has been surfing a little bit today is Darwin Núñez. Young Uruguayan lad, 21-year-old, who plays for Almeria in the second division in Spain, who has got loads of clubs chasing him right now. I think Napoli, Benfica, Brighton have looked at him, Southampton looked at him. He's quite versatile, a bit like Wilson. He can play out wide as well if required. It's a foreign player, so there's obviously the other issues you normally have. But I think he's one that a lot of clubs are looking at as being an incredible talent for the future. He's only 21. And obviously, it's a second division, but a lot of people think that he's got what it takes. So Spurs are probably monitoring that more than anything. As I've always said, if there's a battle for a player's services, Tottenham pretty much always bow out. And often, like we found with Dougherty, literally I found that kind of got some real concrete stuff that on Monday the price was where they wanted it and they were going to go in for it. And 6 days later, he's a Tottenham Hotspur player. And as I've always said, that's kind of the way Tottenham operate. Højbjerg was quite unusual in that they've been tracking him for a while. They inquired in January, but that was more of a contract thing. They knew it was coming down. But for players with bigger amounts of times left on their contract, it's more about not driving that price up because that then becomes a nightmare for Tottenham. Again, I know that frustrates people, but you can kind of understand why. Other positions, as I've said, I'd like to see another attacking midfielder come in. I think Tottenham will examine options there. Again, it's about price. I think they're happy with a lot of the attacking midfield options they have in terms of wingers, and obviously Lo Celso and Dele Alli. I do wonder whether they'll look at it and feel that they need another playmaker. And then you've got the centre-back spot. I do think that depends a lot on which foreign players leave. Say Juan Foyth does move on. Like I say, hasn't been involved even though he's been at the stadium. If they do find either a seller or personally, I hope a loan club for him. I know a loan club doesn't do them any good financially. But if he does move on, that opens up a foreign player spot and a centre-back spot. And if they don't keep Carter Vickers, then, they may seriously look at the Kim Min-jae deal if they can get a decent price for him. But I feel like they've dealt with the bulk of the problem areas in terms of the defensive midfielder. Højbjerg's a bit of everything, isn't he? That role, we'll call it. The right back was a necessity. And I think it's just such a good signing. So pleased with the Dougherty signing. And then, like I say, I think striker is the next real priority. But this is what is so weird about this transfer window. They've got so much done, even though the fans will still grumble because that's what we do as football fans. But they've got so much done early on that we kind of forget there's almost 6 weeks of the window left, maybe more. And then after that, you've got another bonus period of time where they can sell players or loan players to the EFL clubs. Spurs really, after Mourinho saying that, he didn't want to sign 10 transfers or anything like that or whatever, I can't remember the number he said. Spurs could technically do quite a lot of business in this window, depending on who goes out. Because if you think, they've got rid of Kyle Walker-Peters, I say got rid, that sounds horrible because I really liked Kyle Walker-Peters, but they sold Kyle Walker-Peters. If Danny Rose goes as well, if Foyth goes, if Aurier goes, obviously there's always going to be talk about Ndombele. The Ndombele situation is still pretty much what I've always said, in that as a club, they don't want to sell him. They feel that the club record signing, they bought him for a reason, knowing he was going to be raw, and that he, could be such an incredible player for the future for them. The issue is always going to be the player himself. If the player himself kicks up a fuss and it just becomes clear that he's never going to play, then there's going to create a scenario where it obviously would be better for all parties just to cut ties. However, Spurs are never going to take a loss on him. In a million years, they are not there. As I've said, financially, they cannot afford to do that. So they're not going to do that with a player who's got 5 years still left on a 6-year deal he signed. So personally, I hope they work with him, and he knuckles down and doesn't cause issue. If he causes issues, we know how Mourinho is and we know how Levy is. It's not going to work well for him, and it's not going to work well for the club either. It's going to be an absolute mess. But I think we're going to see quite a few outgoings. I think that will be kind of the priority now over the next probably couple of weeks. But like I say, so much more that can be done. And just before I go, because I'm getting towards that waffly 40-minute mark. Amazon documentary comes out tomorrow. I've watched the first 3 episodes. I'm not going to spoil anything. People got a bit annoyed when I had to write a preview. All the journalists wrote previews about the first 3 episodes. I think I spoke about 5 minutes of what is a 7-hour documentary series, and people got really annoyed that I was spoiling stuff. I'm not. There's so much to come. It's really good. It's really good. From the 3 episodes I've seen so far, you won't feel like Tottenham are an absolute mess and you're embarrassed by them. And I don't think Spurs would allow that for the entire series anyway. It's really good. First 3 episodes come out tomorrow. If you've got Amazon Prime Video, obviously, watch it. It's really cool. You get a really good insight. Even for me, you know, I'm very fortunate to see a lot of what happens at Tottenham and know a lot of what goes on behind the scenes. And for me, I was learning loads of extra stuff as well. And I think there'll be more of that to come. Especially Daniel Levy in his own natural environment is quite interesting as well. So yeah. So hopefully there's loads in there. Sorry if I waffled on about certain subjects for too long. But yeah, we've got Watford away next friendly. I'll be talking about Amazon stuff probably as well when you get to see them. We can talk about that with a little bit less spoiler-free problems. And yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else this week. Oh, Europa League. Find out the opponents tomorrow, the draw for that. And I think the draw for the next round is on Tuesday. So we'll find out what very interesting opponents Tottenham will be coming up with. Yeah, it's European competition. It's not the Champions League, but you know the end goal is pretty cool as well. So right, I'm going to leave it there. Hope you all stay healthy, stay safe, and I shall catch you later. Look after yourselves. Bye.